next session is going to be given by someone from Google X. And before that, I want to give my deepest gratitudes and appreciations to a group within Google called Google for Entrepreneurs, who for the last 2 years have been a catalyst for Women 2.0 to go into other cities and other countries. Hey! Listening. One person is listening. So, as I was saying, very, very, very thankful to Google for Entrepreneurs, who has taken Women 2.0 to other cities, other countries. Because of Google, we've been able to take Founder Friday, our monthly networking event, into cities like Mexico City, Argentina. Someone's laughing about that? Someone's telling a joke and they're not telling me the joke. Detroit, and a couple of, and London as well. And so I'm really, really thankful that they're committed to us, they're committed to entrepreneurship, and they're committed to sort of globalizing the benefits of entrepreneurship as well. So our next speaker is coming from actually Google X, the secret skunkworks project group that is unveiling so many exciting things these days. And the person I'm going to bring on stage is Obi Felten. And if you don't know this already, you're going to learn that her most favorite word is magical. Her most hated expression in business is actually, we can't do that because. And I totally, totally agree with her. When someone says, we can't, or no, I can't, I want to shrivel up and run away from that person. So I love the idea of saying yes as much as you can. A little bit more about Obi. She actually helps all the scientists and engineers at Google X take projects like self-driving cars, Project Loon, the smart contact lenses, and a couple others into the real world. Previously, she was the director of consumer marketing for Google in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, which you would think is easy until you realize that Google launches hundreds of things every quarter in a region of 120 plus countries as diverse as Germany, Russia, Egypt, and Kenya. Somehow, she's still here with us today after all that hard work. In her spare time, she is a startup mentor and an investor, angel investor, and she loves focusing on women entrepreneurs. Ha ha ha, how amazing is that? Perfect, perfect. She also led the setup of the campus in London called Campus London, which is a sort of co-working space in London where we actually host some of our networking events there. And if you haven't been there, it's actually really cool. It's in a really cool area. Before Google, Obi launched an e-commerce company launched the e-commerce side of a UK retailer and worked in strategy consulting, as well as she led the e-toys brackets unsuccessful launch into Germany during the first .com era. This kind of reminded me of something like Pets.com story. Anyway, I'm sure there's a lot of exciting things up ahead. So we are excited to bring Obi Felten to the stage. Please join us.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Obi. I'm very excited to be here. And the reason I didn't hug Cheryl Rose is because I'm a mother, and my darling baby daughter gave me her cold. So if you hear an elephant trumpeting in your ear during the speech, that's just me blowing my nose. I'll try and do it discreetly if possible. So in my day job, I work at Google X. And that's the team behind things like self-driving cars and Google Glass and smart contact lenses and internet from balloons. The New York Times called us Google's lab of wildest dreams. And you can think of us as a secret lab, but we think of ourselves as a moonshot factory. So in the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to give you a peek inside the moonshot factory and talk to you a little bit about how we work. And I want to focus on two aspects of the innovation process that are often overlooked, and that's picking the right problem and telling a great story. So let's start with a short video about moonshots. Can we run the video, please?
The actual moonshot is wonderful, inspirational, poetic, beautiful, involved great technical challenges, genuine heroism. It brought the world together. But think about the Polynesian islander on the dugout canoe, deciding one day they were going to go that way. No one had ever been that way before. No one even knew if there was anything that way before. It was amazing, and it changed the world.
People can set their minds to magical, seemingly impossible ideas, and then through science and technology, bring them to reality. And that then sets other people on fire, that other things that look impossible might be accomplishable.
Many years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said, because it is there.
Everyone else in the world is working on that next 10%. If you can be the one that delivers that 10 times improvement, you have a chance to really change things.
If you want cars to run at 50 miles per gallon, fine, you can retool your car a little bit. But if I tell you it has to run on a gallon of gas for 500 miles, you have to start over.
You need a lot of courage in this work, and you need a lot of persistence. Even if you don't really 100% believe it's possible, like you might think this might be possible, have the courage to try. That's how the greatest things have happened.
You don't spend your time being bothered that you can't teleport from here to Japan, because there's a part of you that thinks it's impossible. Moonshot thinking is choosing to be bothered by that.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Humanity's progress has been a series of amazing, audacious things, from the very small and personal up to the great, big, and grand. And we are a species of moonshots. And to me, that's like the really amazing, poetic, and inspirational thing.
When you find your passion, you're unstoppable. You can make amazing things happen. It's been true through all of history.
When Kennedy said that we would put a man on the moon, it's about the fact that he said, we don't know how to do this yet, and we're gonna do it anyway. And that sends chills up everybody's spine. Because if that happens, what couldn't we do?
Okay. Okay, so we think a good moonshot has 3 elements. You have to start with a big problem, something really intractable, really large, something that might affect millions or even billions of people in the world. And then you propose a radical solution to that problem, something that today sounds like science fiction. But you need a breakthrough technology or science that makes you believe that within the next 5 or 10 years, that radical solution actually becomes possible. So self-driving cars are a really good example of this. There's many problems with road transportation. One of the biggest ones is safety, right? 1.2 million people die on the road each year. And many of those accidents are caused by distracted drivers. So the radical solution that we're proposing is, what if you took the driver out of the car? The car is never distracted. The car is never texting. The car is never drunk. The car hasn't just had an argument with his boyfriend. So there's many reasons why we should trust a car driving more than a human person. And in the 20th century, people talked about this as science fiction, but now it's actually within our reach. So we think that within our lifetime, it's possible. In fact, we're hoping that our children won't need to learn how to drive. So if you need to start with the problem, that's the kind of part that people actually often don't pay enough attention to. So I wanted to start by talking a little bit more about problems. I'm a philosophy major, so I'm a diversity hire in an engineering team. And this is a quote from a philosopher that I really love. It's a problem well put is a problem half solved. Now, how many of you love problems? Can I have a show of hands? Raise your hands if you love problems. Oh, that's actually pretty good. Pretty good. So many people don't like problems, right? We reward people for solving problems. We don't reward people for sticking with problems. And so many people think of problems as sort of like little monsters, and you run away as quickly as you can towards the first solution that you can see. And what I would encourage you to do is actually spend some time with the problem. Rich DeVol, who is one of the guys that you met in the video, he loves problems. He runs a team at Google X called Rapid Evaluation. And their job is to find new problems and then build early stage prototypes that help us figure out whether we should look at the problem. So his advice is, ask yourself a bunch of questions. What is this problem? Are there other problems that are related? Are they all equally hard? If I solve one, will that help me understand the problem space better, etc.? And so if you think of the problem in that way, then you can start sort of breaking down this space. So let's take an example. Sorry, I'm being very offline today because I figured by now you guys are sick of PowerPoint slides. So imagine you're in the middle of Africa, and here's a village, and the village doesn't have any internet access. That's actually 2/3 of the world today. So you might say the problem is devices, right? That we need to make cheaper devices because people can't afford smartphones. So that's one problem. Or you might say, actually, they don't even have electricity, right? How are they going to charge their device? So that's problem number 2. And then you get to connectivity, right? How are we going to get connectivity to the village? It may not be economical for a telco to put a cell tower near this, let alone run a cable to the village. So Rich started thinking about this problem. And the interesting thing about this is now the problem has become bigger, right? You've got 3 different things that you're thinking about, but it's also become much richer and more interesting. And you're learning something about the space by looking at adjacent problems, so that you get a better overview and that you get to pick which problem you might want to tackle first. So I used to think about problem spaces like onions. So you solve a problem, you peel off another layer, and there's another problem, and you cry a lot in the process. And Rich taught me to not think of problem spaces like onions. He says they're like ladders. And yes, it's hard to climb the ladder, but if you get to the top of the ladder, you're rewarded with a better view of the entire problem space. So if we now start thinking about this, he basically decided he wanted to tackle the problem of connectivity. And he decided he wanted to do that with balloons. Now, he wasn't the first to suggest that you could give internet access from balloons, but most people had thought about it in terms of one balloon that's tethered. And that then becomes a problem about the tether, because if you want to fly the balloon higher, the tether gets heavier, and at some point, the physics just don't work anymore. So Rich said he proposed that instead of having a tethered balloon, we would have a network of balloons. And these networks would be flying in the stratosphere, and they're flying with the wind around the world. So suddenly, this isn't a problem about tethers anymore. This is a problem about how do you get the balloons to talk to each other? How do you steer them? So he found that if you steer them up and down, you can catch different winds in the atmosphere and therefore send them into different directions. And it's a completely different problem. The other interesting thing that happened is, remember we were talking about the problem being one village in Africa that doesn't have any connectivity? Well, if you have a network of balloons that freely floats across the entire world, suddenly you can give internet to everyone in the world. And why does that matter? Well, it matters for 2 reasons. So one, of course, if you're solving a problem for more people, you're going to have a bigger impact. That's obvious, right? But the thing that's not obvious, that's counterintuitive, is that sometimes it's easier to solve a problem for millions of people than it is to solve a problem for a few. So we have all these balloons, they're floating all over the world. We don't have this yet, by the way. This is the vision. You can totally see how now you're not solving internet access for one village, you're actually solving internet access for the world. And what happens now is, this is incredibly inspiring. Because when you say to people, let's solve internet access, let's give everyone on the entire Earth access to the internet, that brings other people out who want to help you. So people might come out and solve the device problem. No, they are. People are building cheaper and cheaper devices. We don't have to do that. There might be people who figure out how to put solar energy into the village, and so on. Suddenly you're not alone anymore. So hopefully now I've convinced you that it's worth spending some time with the problem. The next thing I want to talk about is storytelling. And you might say, actually, isn't there a bit in between, like where you actually like solve the problem? And that's right. In our case, it takes years of hard science and hard technology to get there. But the reason I want to talk to you about the storytelling is because I think that storytelling is actually a part of the innovation process. Sometimes people think of a story as something that comes at the end. So I've worked as a product marketing person, and I've had many a discussion with engineers and product managers who say, I've built the product, can you go and tell the world about it, please? And then I say, well, your product kind of sucks. I don't really want to tell the world about it. And I tell you, no amount of storytelling at the end is going to save your product if you build the wrong thing or it's not great. So what I would suggest is that you think about the story at the beginning, because the story can actually inspire the engineers to build the right thing. So, Kennedy in the film, that's a great example, right? He said, we're going to put a man on the moon. And that's what inspired an entire generation of scientists and engineers to not just put a man on the moon, but invent tons of things that then were useful for things that were arguably much more useful than actually putting a man on the moon, because I still haven't worked out why that's so amazing. Or yesterday, you heard Gwynne Shotwell from SpaceX talk about how they are inspired by taking people to Mars, and that's really inspiring for her engineers, and that's sustained them over years and years of setbacks. So the story can help you actually build a better product. The story can also help the rest of the world to come along with you. And that's something that I learned the hard way, how important that is. So let me take you back to before I was working for Google X. I was working for Google in Europe, and one of our products was Google Street View. And in the summer of 2010, I was in Germany at my parents' house, and we were working on bringing Street View to Germany, except the Germans didn't want it. The German newspapers were full of stories that say, Google is taking Street View to Germany, there's all these black cars taking pictures of our houses, they're invading our privacy. And even my friends and family were saying, why are you doing such an evil thing? Is that even legal? And it was amazing to us, because we had already launched Street View in 19 countries. So why was Germany any different? Well, you could argue that the Germans are more sensitive about privacy than other countries, and that is true. But I think the deeper truth here is that we had not spent enough time explaining our intent. We hadn't explained how the product benefits people. We hadn't explained why this is, a technology project worth undertaking. And as a result, people just rejected it. So you don't want this to happen, because once people are rejecting it, it's really hard to recover from, right? And of course, Street View isn't the first or the last disruptive technology to hit the world. There's many examples from history, right? People were protesting against automation of looms, against the automobile, against telephones, etc. Here in Silicon Valley, the narrative is often that technology is good. And in Europe, or even in Washington, D.C., people are not so sure. They're saying it's bad for privacy, it might be endangering our kids, it destroys industries, it destroys jobs. Now, it doesn't matter which camp you're in. You're all startup people, so you're probably in the tech optimist camp. But what you need to do is you need to acknowledge and recognize the other viewpoint and be at least willing to have the debate and try and convince them. At Google X, we're unashamed tech optimists, right? We're a team of makers and scientists, and we do believe that moonshots come about through technology, that you can solve really big problems in the world through radical solutions through technology. But we realize that in order to change the world, we can't just build the technology. We have to win people's hearts and minds. So how do you do that? Well, partly because you explain the why and not just the how. Very often when we tell stories about technology, we focus on the sausage making, like how something is built. So if you think about Loon, you could describe Project Loon as a network of high altitude balloons that float on the winds of the stratosphere, and that use Wi-Fi to communicate with receivers on the ground, etc. So that's a story about the how. And if you're interested in that story, go to YouTube and search for Project Loon. There's a whole bunch of videos that our engineers have made, and 10,000 of people are watching those videos. I mean, I think one had like 1.3 million views. So that's definitely a story worth telling. But think about the other story. Think about 2/3 of the world don't have internet access yet. And that's something we should change if we believe that the internet is a good thing. So then the story becomes about Project Loon being a project that uses balloons to give access to the internet to everyone on Earth. Now, which of those stories do you think is more inspiring? Right? Which of those stories do you think makes other people want to be a part of it? So for Loon, we had amazing supporters. We launched the first pilot last June in New Zealand, and the Prime Minister came to our launch. He said, this is a great thing for our country. We're forward-looking, we're innovative, we love this. And we have telecom companies partnering with us that want to take Loon to their countries and asking, helping us get their country to let us fly over them. Because of course, we have to get the whole world to let us fly over. So that way, the story becomes like a rallying cry for people to take part. And it's very hard to do that when you're in a very early stage, right? You guys who are like in the super early stage of your startups feel this. Like it's very hard when you haven't done anything yet and you're just painting the picture of what the future could look like. And the reason why we announce our projects relatively early, which puts us into a position of vulnerability because we can't demonstrate yet, that millions of people can get internet from balloon, is partly because we want people to share in this dream, in this moonshot, and we want to convince them that it's a moonshot worth taking, and we want to convince them to help us. So this brings me back to the story of Street View. You may be wondering, did you ever launch the product in Germany, or did you just give up? Well, we did. I ended up project managing that launch, partly because I said we should not give up, and it is a good product for people, and we should not just back down. And what happened was that in that summer, when everyone in Germany seemed to hate us, we got a parcel. And the parcel was from the mayor of a small town in Bavaria called Oberstaufen. And in the parcel were a cowbell, a picture postcard of the very pretty village, and a cake. Now I've got a picture of the cake here. The cake said, "Street View, welcome in Oberstaufen." And the mayor's letter said, "We're a beautiful village. We have nothing to hide. We live off tourism. We want to be on Street View. Please will you send your cars and put us on Street View?" So I rang the engineering team in Mountain View and I said, "We just got this. Can we add this village into the launch, which was meant to be the 20 biggest cities in Germany only?" And they said, "No, we can't really do that, but we could do a special release for you 2 weeks before. Are you interested in that?" Well, I said, yes, I was. So we launched Street View in Germany in the village of Oberstaufen. We invited the world press. They all came. The villagers put on an amazing Dorffest with beer and sausages and, of course, another cake. And the reporters were walking around the village, interviewing the villagers in their dirndl and in their lederhosen. And even the most cynical reporter found it difficult to argue with the villagers. The Oberstaufeners were so proud. They were the first digital village in Germany. And it was a great story. And it went around the world. There was 90 TV pieces, over 1,200 press articles, all the German press, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Shanghai Daily, hundreds of YouTube videos, thousands of Facebook and Twitter mentions, all about Oberstaufen. And I think the amazing thing here is that the launch in the end went really well. We launched the rest of Germany a couple of weeks later, and the country went straight to number 2 in Google's global rankings of Street View usage. So a year later, nobody really knew what the fuss was about. But the credit for this definitely goes to the brave Oberstaufeners, because they had the vision to see what this technology could do for them, and therefore they had the courage to say yes when everyone else said no. And through that, they literally put themselves on the map. So I've talked to you about moonshots, about solving big problems with radical solutions and breakthrough technology. I've talked to you about why it's worth spending time with a problem instead of running away from it, climbing richest problems ladders. I've talked to you about storytelling, about how you can use a great story to inspire your engineers to build better products, and how you can use a great story to inspire the world to be with you and not against you. And I've taken you from the groundedness of Google Maps to the loftiness of balloons, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you're working on. I just hope that you pick the right problem and you tell a great story. Thank you.
Thank you, Obi. That was wonderful. We have time for just one question. One question, burning question. Anybody? Are you standing because you have a question or because you have a mic?
I have the microphone.
Oh, got it.
I have questions.
Go for it. You have one question, go.
So you live in the clouds a lot, and you're dealing with big concepts and then nitty-gritty details. How do you manage that balance? Like, how do you live within the details and the cloud?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I personally am just a person who loves that kind of stuff. I am slightly more drawn towards the early stage when everything is really undefined. And I think when you're in the early stage of either a startup or a kind of project like this, you have to be able to do the up and down thing, right? When I was setting up eToys in Germany, the first thing I set up was the printer. And I was like, God, I better hire some people because I can't do this by myself. And I think that's one of the essences of being an entrepreneur, is being able to do the kind of transitions. The harder thing is often to carve out the space for the kind of long-term thinking. So I go for a lot of walks, do meetings as walks instead of sitting in a conference room. I work from home 1 day a week just so that I don't have to talk to people all the time. Carve yourself out some spaces where you can do the longer-term thinking.
It's a great piece of advice. I do what I call a walking meditation just to clear my head.
It's our friend Nilofer, she did a TED talk on this.
Yes,
on
that's right.
That, sitting is the new smoking, I think she called it.
Yeah, yeah, the amount of people anyway, it's very disappointing. Thank you so much, Obi. You're awesome.
Cool. I'll take my cake.